creators, Lilu here on the Juicy Living Tour in San Diego, and I have a treat for you because I'm sitting next to, how do you even call the work that you do? Can you put even a title on this?
Awesome.
I agree. Oh my God, there's a lot. I love it. There's a lot. You're bridging a lot. You're not bridging, but yeah, you are. You're into epigenetics,
Yes.
and this new type of biology, or
Yes, well, the thing about epigenetics is it's just a way to dramatize what's going on. What's going on is the reduction of human suffering. That's ultimately what we're all about. And drilling down to the level of molecular biology, what's happening in your cells, in your molecules in your cells, when you're shifting yourself from a space of being stressed and worried and anxious and depressed to being happy and joyful and balanced. Those are good things intrinsically to have happened to you, but what happens when we do the research to look into the cell, we find that it's producing profound biological changes in your body. So as you shift on the spectrum from worry, anxiety, and stress to happiness, joy, and love, all kinds of fantastic shifts happen in your body. For example, your levels there are two very similar hormones produced by your adrenal glands, and they are cortisol, your main stress hormone, and DHEA, your main healing hormone. Now, the cortisol molecule and the DHEA molecule look almost exactly the same, but have opposite functions in the body. DHEA keeps your skin clear, keeps your bones healthy, your
wrinkles away.
It does. It literally helps reduce skin wrinkling over time, whereas cortisol stresses you. If you have high cortisol, you have things like loss of muscle mass, loss of bone mass, and so on. So as we shift our minds, our hearts, as we move from worry and anxiety to love and joy and inner peace, then the ratio of cortisol and DHEA shifts. Peace sends a signal to your adrenal glands to produce lots of DHEA, lots of that juicy cell repair hormone, whereas stress sends a different signal to your body. It says, hey, there are bad things out there, there are threats out there, and your body then produces lots of cortisol. So you're using your mind and your feelings, your heart, your spiritual experiences to literally drive which hormones your body produces. And if you take the photographs of people who are having lots of cortisol in their bodies, and over time you see them aging really rapidly. High stress ages you, whereas high levels of peace and joy literally rejuvenate your body.
Because as we're progressing, as we're healing ourselves, actually our body can do its natural function, which is to thrive and do well.
Yes. That is the natural way we are, and only when we overlay that natural thriving with the weight of stress, worry, and so on, do we burden it with those stress hormones. Now, these kinds of behaviors are hard to change. It is so hard to change. You watch people, they'll take a weekend workshop, read an inspirational book, watch your show, feel so good, but then how do you change long term? Because we have these strongly conditioned neural pathways in our brains, and if we're thinking that negative thought over and over and over again, the research of Nobel Prize-winning Dr. Eric Kandel shows us that within 1 hour of sending a signal through a neural pathway, 1 hour, you can double the number of synaptic connections in that pathway. So if you're thinking that thought, I hate my job, I don't get along with my wife, I am in conflict with my parents or my child, whatever, all of those things, thinking those negative thoughts over and over and over again, every hour you send that signal through that synaptic pathway, you literally reshape the wiring of your brain. And so we find, for example, people with PTSD, we find that over time, all of the parts of their brain responsible for creativity, for learning, actually shrink. For turning long-term memories from short-term memories, those parts shrink. All those parts shrink, and the parts that handle stress actually grow. So you are actually shaping your brain by the quality of your thoughts. It is so vital to meditate, to do EFT, do heart math, do EMDR, do something to shift yourself from that state of being stressed, high cortisol, to high DHEA and relaxation.
How do you reach this unconscious side? Because we're aware that most of the time things happen to us and we have these reactions
Yes.
due to those past events that didn't happen really in a beautiful, harmonious way. So then there's the kind of like this, we react the same way that we used to at 5 years old, for example, when our mom just said, "You better never do this again."
Yeah, and so we have that 5-year-old behavior installed, and then we're endlessly reenacting that behavior when we're 30, 40, 50, 60, and it doesn't serve us, doesn't help us then. So we've then also built all these neural pathways against carrying that signal. The world is threatening. The world isn't a safe place. So you then approach a new situation, a new job, a new friend, a new place to live, and you're seeing it through the lens you built up in your head of threat, of problems. So what do? You recreate the same kind of problems over and over and over again in your future. For example, one of the non-profits I used to work for was women who are homeless in shelters with children. We try and relocate them, but we found that they would often go back to another unhealthy relationship. So they've had one terrible relationship with a man, they wound up in the shelter, they get out of the shelter, get on their feet again, and pick another man just like that to be with again, over and over and over again. Why are people choosing these unhealthy behaviors that so hurt them over and over? It's because essentially they're addicted to their own high cortisol. They've learned high stress. Maybe their father was an alcoholic, the mother was a rageaholic, they grew up in a violent household. They needed high cortisol to survive at 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. But we get stuck there. We get stuck at this level, this biochemical mix in our bodies, which feels normal to us. So you take that person out of that harsh situation, put them in a nice, peaceful situation, and they feel as though they're bored. There isn't enough excitement. So then they do something like hooking up with somebody else or finding a job where the boss abuses them. They do something to recreate that seemingly horrible situation, recreates the high cortisol in their brains. It is really hard to shift our behavior. It is possible, but it's difficult to do.
But the title of your book is the Genies in Our Genes, right? So it's not something that we can actually change things in our life.
It is. It's hard to change, and it's possible to change. And what you have to do is you have to find something that works for you and then do it repeatedly, over and over and over again, so you build up the new neural pathways. So for example, say you're in the habit of reacting a certain way to certain kinds of people, and you always react that way. You meet that same kind of person, and you then choose to react differently. It's hard to make that choice, but if you make that choice over and over and over again, even though it feels wrong in your body, you gradually build up more and more neural pathways around that new behavior. So we teach heart math, we teach mindfulness meditation, we teach EFT tapping, anything you can do to break that old cycle. Because once you break that cycle one time, for example, say you are used to reacting to certain situations and seeing them as a threat or a problem. So you see certain kinds of people and you react to them. You've got the strongly conditioned pathway in your brain that's used to doing that. Or maybe you, say, for example, get into conflict with authority figures. So you have a boss, you're in conflict, and it always works that way for you. How do you then shift that behavior? And what happens is if you shift it one time, or 2 times, or 3 times, or a few times, then you can have the possibility of shifting it permanently. So the key is you feel yourself wanting to say that mean word to your spouse, or your parent, or your child, or your coworker. You don't do it, you tap, you become mindful, and after a while, the body realizes that urge to say that harmful thing, that seeming harmful thought is not a real threat to your survival. The minute your smart body realizes that my boss isn't a threat to my survival, my wife, my child, my parent isn't really harming me, isn't really trying to harm me, once you break the association 1 or 2 times, usually the body then says, okay, I no longer need to think when I see Aunt Jennifer that I need to go into this stress response. And you break the association a few times, and then suddenly you have the emotional freedom of stepping back and not being triggered anymore. So it's hard to break those associations. It is possible.
The deeper the trauma is, the more work there's to do, or it's non-linear really? It depends on finding the right methodology.
Yeah, and I recommend playing with different methodologies. Try different things, see what works for you. The encouraging thing is once you stop using that traumatic pathway in your brain. So again, Eric Kandel's work, he won the Nobel Prize for Medicine in 2000 for this work, showing that if you use a neural pathway repeatedly, the number of connections doubles in an hour. But if you stop using it, your smart body then begins to disassemble that neural pathway within 2 weeks. So within 2 weeks, the pathways you aren't using start to decay. And so over time, every few minutes, every few months, we're totally rewiring the actual hardware of our brain. So our perceptual frame through which we see the world, shifting to see the world as a place of love and beauty and joy rather than of threat and difficulty. It's hard to do, it's possible to do that, and as you practice these behaviors over and over and over again, you literally rewire your whole neural network to have those presuppositions. Then, of course, you approach every day as a miracle. You approach every person with love. You approach every new experience with passion. You approach everything from this point of it being new and fresh and living in a world of wonder. And so that becomes the predisposition of your brain. So suddenly, you're creating fantastic people, experiences, and events in your life. Everything starts to shift. You shift your neurology, you start to have the wiring of positivity in your brain, and suddenly you start to manifest that on the outside level as well. So it's very powerful to do. My main message is do these things, meditate, learn to tap, learn to shift any kind of stress response you have. Do it over and over and over again, even if it feels difficult or wrong, and over time you will have a whole new brain and a whole new behavior and a whole new life as well.
And possibly if we all do that, we will transform this planet.
We are on a path to doing that. In fact, our crisis that we're in so many levels, with pollution, overpopulation, limited resources, and so on, global warming, all of those things are just dramatizing to us as a species the need to change. Once we shift enough people individually, we have capacities and potentials as human beings. I'm not worried about any of those. I don't worry about global warming. I know that as we shift enough people, we shift their anxiety, depression, PTSD, even just a few 100,000 people, a few million people, then suddenly all of these mental and physical afflictions that humankind has suffered under for so long, those start to shift. And then as this new global brain awakens, we have the ability collectively to change all kinds of things on the outside, but it all starts with our own inner peace.
Beautiful, Dawson. Thank you for this delicious conversation. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, delightful. Thank you so much.
To all beautiful co-creators out there, big, big kiss from San Diego, California on the Juicy Living Tour. Bye.